Hi everyone, our first goal this episode is to make the points change color when the mouse hovers over them, and to be able to move them around by left-click dragging. So the built-in way of doing this sort of thing is using one of the handles functions, such as handles.freeMoveHandle. From this one line of code, for example, we get a handle that can be selected and moved around in the editor. However, for this series we're actually going to be implementing this handle behavior ourselves for the benefit of some extra control. For example, one of the things I want is for newly added points to be selected automatically, so that you don't have to click a second time to tweak their position. I'd also like to have control over the highlight and selection colors of the handles. Anyway, once we've done that, the second task for this video will be implementing the ability to insert new points along the lines. Okay, so in the shape editor script, I'm going to come down to the bottom here and create a subclass called selectionInfo. And this is going to hold a couple of variables. First of all, a public int, point index, which I'll set to -1 by default, so it's just not referring to any point. And then there'll be a public bool, mouse is over point, and another public bool, point is selected. Okay, and let's create a selectionInfo object up at the top here. And just like we initialize the shape creator in the onEnable method, let's do the same thing for our selectionInfo, so set that equal to a new selectionInfo object. And then I'm going to create a new method, a void called update mouse over selection. It'll take in vector3 for the current mouse position. So in here we want to figure out the index of the point that the mouse is currently over, and it should just be -1 if it's not over any point. So let me create an int mouse over point index equal to -1 by default, and then we're going to loop through all of the points. So I'll make a for loop going from I equal to 0 to I less than shapecreator.points.count. And for each of these, we're going to check if the distance between the mouse position and the point, so shapecreator points with an index of I, if that is less than the radius of the point, which I think we chose to be 0.5. Instead of using this hard-coded value, we should actually replace this with a variable, of course. So let me go into the shape creator file, and here we can just have a public float, call this the handle radius, set that equal to 0.5, and in the shape editor I'll replace 0.5 with shapecreator.handleRadius, and then when we're drawing the point over here I'll use the shape creator handle radius there as well. Okay, so if the mouse is over the current point, then I'm going to set mouse over point index equal to the current index I, and just go to break out of the loop. Alright, once we've finished with the loop, we can say that if the mouse over point index is not equal to selectionInfo.pointIndex, so if something's changed, then we can first of all set selectionInfo.pointIndex equal to the new point index, and then we want selectionInfo.mouseIsOverPoint to be false if the mouse over point index is equal to -1 and true otherwise. So I'll say this is equal to mouse over point index not equal to -1. Finally, since the selection is changed, we'll say needs repaint equals true. Okay, in the draw method, I'm here going to say if the index of the current point that is being drawn is equal to the selectionInfo point index, then I'm going to set handles.color equal to, say, color.red, and otherwise I'll set it to color.white. Finally, we of course need to actually call this update mouse over selection method, so I'll just call this over here at the end of handle input. Update mouse over selection, passing in mouse position. Okay, so let's save that, go into Unity, and I'll select my little game object here, and when the mouse goes over, we should see this turning red. Additionally, we should now be able to change the handle radius in the inspector over here, and that should all still work. Okay, so we've got the highlighting working, but now we want to actually be able to click and drag to move these points. So let's go back to the shape editor script, and I'm going to create a new method called handle left mouse down, which takes in vector 3 mouse position. And at the same time, just to save a bit of time, I'm going to also create handle left mouse up and handle left mouse drag. Alright, so we already have some left mouse down behavior over here, so let's cut that out, paste that in there, and instead call the handle left mouse down method, passing in the mouse position. Now, in this left mouse down method, there are two possibilities. Either the mouse is currently over a pre-existing point, in which case we want to select that point, or it's over sort of empty space, in which case we want to create a new point and then select that new point. So let's say that if not selection info dot mouse is over point, then we will create a new point like so. But then regardless of whether or not the mouse is over a point, we're going to want to set selection info dot point is selected to true. But if we created a new point, we're going to want to change the selection info point index to the index of that new point. So we'll say selection info dot point index is equal to shape creator dot points dot count -1. All right. In the left mouse up method, I want to say that if the point is currently selected, then first of all, it will no longer be selected. So selection info dot point is selected is equal to false. And I'll also set the point index back to -1. And I'll request a repaint as well. Next, in the left mouse drag method, I want to say that if there is a point selected, then we're going to set the position of that point. So shape creator dot points with an index of selection info dot point index will set its position to the mouse position. Okay, so now we want to actually call these two methods from the handle input method. So let's say if GUI event dot type, let me actually just copy this to save some time. So if the type is mouse up and it is the left mouse, then we're going to call handle left mouse up, passing in the mouse position. And I'll paste the same thing again, except here I'm interested in it being a mouse drag event, in which case I'll call handle left mouse drag. Okay, the last thing I want to do before we test this out is just go into the draw method, and I just want to give it a different color if the point is actually selected. So I'm going to say handles.color is equal to, and then if the selection info dot point is selected, I'll set this equal to, say, color.black. Otherwise, I'll give it its red highlight color. So let's save this and try it out. So I'll give that a moment to compile, and now mouse over still goes red, but if I actually click, it should turn black. The dragging isn't working though, and that's just because it is working, but I need to tell it to repaint while I'm dragging. So in handle left mouse drag, after setting the position, I'll just say needs repaint is true. Okay, let's try this once again. So once that compiles, I can now drag this around, and if I insert a new point, it's automatically selected, and I can drag that as well. Okay, now one sort of undesirable thing that's probably happening at the moment is if I drag a point of a higher index over a point of a lower index, it's going to pick up that new point to select, since we're continually calling this update mouse over selection method. Now, I think I'm actually going to rename this to update mouse over info, just so that it doesn't sound like it deals with the actual selection of points. And I'm only going to call this if the point is not selected. So let me just add the exclamation mark before that, like so. All right, so now if I save that and come in here, I should be able to drag these points around without it picking up the other points. Great, so the only thing we need to get working with the movement now is the undo functionality. So currently if I move a point and then press Command Z to undo, it's not undoing the movement, it's instead just undoing the last point that was added. So let's go back into the script, and when the left mouse is released, we're going to want to call undo.recordObject, passing in our shape creator object, and I'll give this a name like move point. Alright, now recall that record object works roughly by comparing the state of the object before to the state of the object afterwards, and by the object I mean the shape creator object that we passed in. So in order for this to work, we're going to have to first set the position of the point that we've moved back to its original position, and then after we call record object, set it to its new final position. So in the selection info class, I'm going to create a public vector3 called position at start of drag. And when we select the object, so in handle left mouse down, I'm going to say selection info dot position at start of drag is equal to the mouse position. And then over here, we can say shape creator dot points with an index of selection info dot point index is equal to selection info dot position at start of drag. And afterwards, let me copy that, we can set it equal to the mouse position. Alright, so if I save that, go into Unity, I can now move these points around and also undo and redo their movement. Let's now move on to inserting points along the lines. Okay, so coming down to the selection info class, I'm going to create a new public int called the line index, which I'll set to -1, and a new public bool mouse is over line. Then in the update mouse over info method, at the bottom here, I'm going to say that if selection info dot mouse is over point, then the mouse can't be over a line, so I'll set that to false. Selection info dot mouse is over line equals false. Otherwise, we want to check if the mouse is over a line. So I'm going to copy this for loop here to loop through all of the points. And I'm going to get vector3 next point in shape is equal to shape creator dot points with an index of i+1. And of course, we'll want to make sure this doesn't go out of bounds by saying mod shape creator dot points dot count. All right, we can then say float distance from mouse to line, and we're going to use a method in the handle utility class called distance point to line segment. So the distance from mouse position to the line segment defined by point I in the shape creator and the next point in shape. Now, the distance to line segment method is expecting vector 2's, but we're giving it vector 3's here. And we can't just cast these to vector 2's because then it would use their x and y coordinates, when in fact we want to use their x and z coordinates. So this is admittedly straying a little bit from the topic at hand, but I quite like to have an extension method for converting to a vector 2 like that. So I'm very quickly going to create a new C# script called extension methods. And this will just be a public static class, non-inheriting from anything. And I'll create a public static method returning a vector 2 called something like convert to xz. And we say that this is an extension method of the vector 3 struct by saying this vector 3. And I'll just call that v3. And then this will return a new vector 2 with v3.x for its x coordinate and v3.z for its y coordinate. Alright, so if we save that, we can go into the shape editor and write mouse position dot 2xz, and similarly points I dot 2xz, and same thing for this last one as well. Just above the for loop, I'm going to create an int mouse over line index, which will be -1 by default. And then here we can say if the distance from mouse to line is less than some threshold distance, and I think I'll just use the shape creator dot handle radius for this as well, then mouse over line index is equal to I. Now, it's of course possible that in some cases there'll be multiple lines within this handle radius of the mouse, and so we don't just want to choose the first one, but we want to choose the closest one. So over here, I'm going to create float closest line distance, and I'm going to start this off at shape creator dot handle radius, and then in this if statement, I'll say if the distance from mouse to line is less than the closest line distance, then closest line distance gets set to this new distance. Alright, once we're done with all of this, we can say that if selectioninfo.lineindex is not equal to the mouse over line index, then the selectioninfo line index gets set to the new line index, and selectioninfo.mouse is over line will be equal to, as with the point, false if the line index is -1 and true otherwise. So mouse over line index not equal to -1. And then we'll ask for a repaint. Just up here where we're setting mouse is over line to false if the mouse is over a point, I should also set the line index back to -1. Okay, now in the draw method, I want to say that if I is equal to the current line index, then I want to draw this line in a different color, and I also want to draw it not as a dotted line, but as a solid line. So let me copy this here. I'll change the color to color.red, and instead of draw dotted line, I'll call draw line, and just remove this dot size parameter there. Alright, and I'll put the rest of this inside the else statement. And let's save that and try it out. So once this compiles, I'll try moving the mouse near to a line, and we should see that turning solid red. So that is nice. We now just need to be able to actually click to insert a point along that line. So the way we'll do this is in the mouse down method over here. When we're adding a point, I'm going to start by saying int new point index is equal to, and then if selectioninfo.mouse is over line, then the new point index is going to be equal to the line index plus 1. Otherwise, it's going to be equal to the number of points currently in the shape creator points list, like so. Okay, so now instead of saying points.add mouse position, we're going to say insert that mouse position at the new point index. Okay, and we'll set the point index to that new point index that we calculated. So if we save this now, go into Unity, as always wait for it to compile, and then click along the line, we should see that we're able to insert a new point wherever we want. So that is it for this episode. In the next one we'll be adding support for multiple shapes. Until then, cheers.